All right, team, let's talk about something that's really at the heart of what we do: threat and error management. Now, this isn't going to be some dry, by the book training module. We're talking about an operational mindset, a way of thinking that we all need to share to keep every single one of our flights safe. It's our shared mission. So, let me ask you a question. Seriously, think about it. When was your last perfect flight? I mean, from the moment dispatch starts planning, to maintenance signing it off, all the way to shutting down the engines, a flight where literally nothing unexpected popped up. No last-minute schedule changes, no crazy weather, no weird taxi instructions. Yeah, I'm guessing you can't really think of one. And that right there is the whole point. And that's where this idea really hits home. The perfect flight? Well, it just doesn't exist. It's a fantasy. Our world is constantly changing, and that means we have to completely reframe what we mean by a threat. A threat isn't just some once-in-a-career emergency. Nope, it's any of those little, everyday curveballs, the things that we are constantly, day in and day out, having to manage. Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with why these deviations are just a fact of life. Then we'll get into the TEM safety net itself. We're going to look at threats specific to your role, talk about SOPs as our shield, and cover what to do when things get a little hairy. And then we'll wrap it all up with our shared mission. All right, first up, the inevitable deviation. Let's dig into the core problem that TEM is really built to solve. Here's the most important thing to get our heads around. We work in the real world, right? Not some perfectly programmed simulator. So threats and errors, they're just part of the deal. They're baked into the cake of what we do every single day. The whole point of TEM isn't to pretend we can create a perfect bubble where nothing goes wrong. That's impossible. The point is to give us the tools and the mindset to manage the chaos, to handle these things smartly, and keep our safety margins wide open. So how do we actually build that safety net? Well, TEM gives us 3 key building blocks, and this is so important. This is our shared language of safety. It doesn't matter if you're a pilot, a flight attendant, a mechanic, or a dispatcher, we all need to be speaking the same language here. Okay, first up, threats. You know what these are. They're the things that are completely out of our control, right? The stuff that just happens to us. We're talking about pop-up thunderstorms, a last-minute schedule change from the client, a ridiculously complex clearance from ATC, basically anything that makes the day more complicated and really forces us to pay attention. Next, we've got errors. Now, these are different. These are on us. It's when we, as a team or as individuals, do something or maybe fail to do something that takes us off course from the plan or from our procedures. You know, like reading back a clearance wrong or accidentally skipping an item on a checklist. The whole game here is to catch these things, trap them, before they grow into bigger problems. And what happens if a threat gets by us or an error goes unchecked? Well, that can lead us into an undesired state. This is when things have officially gone sideways. We're in a situation we never intended to be in. Maybe we've busted an altitude, or flying with the wrong flap setting, or we've turned down the wrong taxiway. This is that critical moment. It's pretty much the last layer of our safety net, our final chance to get things back on track. Okay, we've got the definitions down. Now let's get real. Let's talk about you and your job. It's time to really tune your personal radar to the specific threats that you see every single shift. So for our dispatchers and mechanics, I want to talk to you for a second. Your world is a little different, right? A lot of the time, you're working on your own. So while the flight crew is talking about crew resource management, your superpower is individual resource management. It's all about that personal discipline to use every single thing available to you, digging into the manuals, calling tech support, getting the crew on the phone, to handle a threat when you're the only one there to see it. And just look at how specific this gets. For a dispatcher, you've got environmental threats like a backed up ATC system, but then you've got organizational stuff thrown at you, like a schedule change with zero notice. For a mechanic, you could be out on the ramp navigating around a bunch of construction or back in the hangar dealing with a manual that's missing a key page. The point is, seeing these things, calling them what they are, threats, that's step 1 to getting ahead of them. Okay, now let's talk about life on board the aircraft. For our pilots and our flight attendant, your world revolves around crew resource management. CRM is our #1 tool in the toolbox. It's how we talk to each other, how we back each other up, and how we work together as one team to trap those threats and errors in real time. You could say it's the engine that makes TEM work in the air. And again, let's look at some specifics. For pilots, you're constantly juggling threats, right? It could be bad weather, a confusing taxiway at some new airport, or an MEL that forces you to change how you do things. And for our flight attendant, sure, turbulence is an obvious one. But what about a chatty passenger during sterile cockpit? Or an interruption right when you're in the middle of a critical safety-related task? Recognizing that those things are also threats is absolutely key to managing them. Okay, so we're getting good at spotting threats. The next big question is, how do we stop those threats from turning into errors? Well, that brings us to our absolute best line of defense. Listen, I really can't say this enough. Our SOPs, they aren't just suggestions. They are our shield. Think about it. They represent all the lessons learned over thousands and thousands of flight hours. Knowing your SOPs cold, and I mean really knowing them, and then having the discipline to stick to them every single time, especially when things get stressful, that is, without a doubt, the best way to keep a threat from becoming an error. And when errors do happen, they usually fall into one of three buckets. You've got aircraft handling errors, being off on speed, using the wrong configuration, or messing up the automation. Then there are procedural errors. That's when we deviate from a checklist, a call-out, or any other SOP. And finally, communication errors, mishearing ATC, or just not communicating clearly with each other. Knowing these categories helps us pinpoint where we might need to be extra careful. But what happens when, despite our best efforts, a threat gets through and an error is made? What happens when we find ourselves in a tough spot? That's what we're talking about now, how we manage that final layer of the safety net. And let's be crystal clear about what an undesired state is. It's not some fuzzy concept. It's a real, measurable thing. We're talking about being off altitude or off course. We're talking about having the airplane configured incorrectly or turning onto the wrong taxiway. These aren't minor issues. They are flashing red lights telling us that our safety margin is shrinking and shrinking fast. When this happens, our response has to be automatic and it has to be disciplined. It all comes down to a simple 3-step process. First, you identify it. See the deviation for what it is. Second, you communicate it. Speak up. Say it loud and clear for the whole team. Hey, we're getting high on the glide slope. Wait, I think that clearance was for someone else. And third, you correct it. Use your training, use the SOPs, and get things back to where they need to be. It's that simple. Identify, communicate, correct. That's the drill. Okay, let's wrap this up. We've covered the what and the how of TEM. But now, let's talk about the why. Let's talk about what this means for us as a team. This is the whole ballgame right here. We need to build a shared mindset that is always threat-forward focused. What does that mean? It means we stop being firefighters, just reacting to problems as they pop up. Instead, we become chess players. We're always looking 2 or 3 moves ahead, scanning the horizon, using our experience to see threats coming and deal with them long before they can ever become a real problem. And that's what TM gives us. It's the framework that makes this possible. It turns us into one team, all speaking the same language of safety, all focused on one single mission: to master the complexities of our job and keep our operation as safe as it can possibly be. So I want to leave you with one final thought, a challenge really. This isn't just theory. This is about what you do tomorrow. So based on everything we just talked about, what is just one specific threat in your job that you're going to be looking for on your very next shift? And what's your plan to deal with it? Give that some real thought, because that's how this stops being a training session and starts being how we operate.